Have you ever noticed how loud the world becomes when you choose silence? People come to me and say, "Louise, if I walk away without a word, will they think I'm weak?" And I smile gently and say, "My love, sometimes silence is the loudest truth you'll ever speak." I've seen it again and again, how we stay too long, explain too much, react too quickly, because a part of us still believes we need to earn our peace, justify our boundaries, defend our leaving. But what if you allowed yourself to believe that your presence is a gift, not something to be negotiated? What if removing yourself isn't rejection, but protection? Yes, let's explore today's sacred topic, removing yourself completely and letting your silence do the talking. First, I want you to understand this. Reaction and response are not just words, they are different energies. One comes from fear, the other from freedom. Not everyone who reacts is weak, and not everyone who stays silent is strong. But the moment you begin to notice you're reacting, you open a doorway, a sacred space to choose differently, to pause, to come home to yourself. A reaction is fast, fiery. It comes from the nervous system, not the soul. It bursts out of you like a flare in the dark. You say something you didn't mean, or retreat in silence that feels like punishment. A reaction tries to defend you, but often leaves you feeling raw, unseen, and even smaller than before. Have you noticed how a reaction drains your energy, like a fire that burns itself out too quickly? Now feel into this instead. A response is spacious. It is slow like breath. It doesn't mean silence, it means sovereignty. A response comes from a place of power, not panic. It begins with a pause, a breath, a returning inward. Instead of asking, "How can I win?" or "How can I prove myself?" it asks, "What would serve my peace?" and "What outcome truly honors me?" If a reaction says, "Fix this now so I feel worthy," then a response whispers, "I am already worthy. Let me speak from that knowing." Let's imagine them side by side. A reaction is a spark. It may light a fire, but it also can destroy. A response is a lantern. It brings light, not damage. It guides, not burns. One is impulsive, the other is intentional. Reaction defends the wound. Response honors the healing. When you respond, you are not pushing people away. You are calling your power back to where it belongs. And the beauty is, the more you practice responding instead of reacting, the more grounded you become. Not because life stops being messy, but because your peace stops being negotiable. You learn to carry stillness like a sacred tool. You speak from clarity, not reactivity. You walk away, not to prove anything, but because some energies no longer feel like home. Today, just try this. When the moment feels tight, give yourself space. When the trigger arises, give yourself breath. And when your old patterns scream to fight or flee, place your hand over your heart and ask, "What would the loving version of me choose right now?" You don't need to rush that answer, it's already within you. I remember a time when silence felt like abandonment, when not responding meant losing control, when the quiet felt like punishment instead of protection. I was younger then, in years, in spirit, in trust, but the deeper I went into this journey, the more I began to understand that silence can be a sanctuary, a form of power, not passivity, a sacred pause that tells the body, "You are safe now. You don't have to fight to be heard." Let's imagine something together. You're standing in the middle of a room filled with noise, voices rising, emotions swirling, demands tugging at every corner of your mind. Your nervous system is on high alert, your throat tight, your mind racing. Now picture yourself stepping outside that room. The door closes behind you. You hear only your breath. The sky above you is open. The air is calm. That, right there, is what silence does to your spirit. It clears the fog. It lets the soul stretch. It invites truth back into the space that noise once crowded. Silence is not the absence of action. It is the presence of intention. It's not emptiness, it's choice. It's knowing when to withdraw, not out of weakness, but out of devotion to your inner wholeness. When you choose not to engage, not because you are afraid, but because you are aware, you are drawing a sacred circle around your peace. That silence is your boundary, not drawn in anger, but held in reverence. And inside that circle, your nervous system finds something it forgot how to trust: stillness. We are taught to respond quickly, to answer texts, defend opinions, explain ourselves immediately. But what if you allowed space instead? What if you honored the power of emotional distance, not as disconnection, but as devotion to clarity? What if waiting to speak was not silence, but wisdom? Silence creates room for remembering. It allows you to ask, who am I without this conflict? Who am I outside this dynamic? It offers you the grace to pause, to realign, to choose how you wish to be, rather than being pulled into what someone else wants you to become. Think of silence like the still water of a lake. It reflects only when it's undisturbed. In the same way, your truth becomes clearest when you are no longer reacting to the chaos around you. You begin to see what was always there, that your energy was never meant to be wasted in convincing. It was meant to be preserved in becoming. There will be moments when silence feels like exile, but trust this: it is also where the deepest parts of you rise. The parts that say, you don't need to fight to be worthy. The parts that whisper, you don't have to explain your boundaries to people who benefit from you having none. The parts that have long waited for you to choose peace, not as an escape, but as a homecoming. And sometimes silence is the only voice that speaks clearly when love has been clouded by confusion, and your inner knowing needs room to breathe. So next time you find yourself in the pull of proving, explaining, chasing, breathe. Soften your shoulders. Say nothing if nothing is true. Let your absence speak where your words no longer feel safe. Let your stillness draw the line where your energy says, I end here. Let it be a full-bodied silence, one that stands firm without hostility and makes space for grace instead of chaos. Silence is not about punishing the other. It's about protecting the self. It's about learning that your energy is sacred, and not everyone is meant to sit at the table of your presence. It's about giving yourself the space to rise gently, without apology. It's not a retreat, it's a return to a wiser, steadier, softer version of you. And remember this: you don't have to raise your voice to rise. You don't have to defend your peace to deserve it. You are allowed to be the quiet that saves you. You are allowed to let your stillness speak for the strength you've always carried. Have you ever wondered why stepping back, completely, quietly, lovingly, can feel so terrifying and yet so deeply right? We've been taught that to love is to stay, to fix, to try harder, to hold on, no matter the weight. So when the moment comes where your soul whispers, it's time to go, it may feel like you are abandoning something. But what if, just what if, what you're actually doing is choosing something sacred? What if walking away is not a collapse, but a crossing over, a gentle reclaiming of your self-worth? Let's sit with that. There are times in life when your silence will do more healing than your explanations ever could. When staying becomes an act of self-erasure, and leaving becomes the doorway back to wholeness. And it's not just about protecting yourself, it's about no longer enabling what is not love. When you remove yourself from a space, a relationship, a pattern that dishonors you, you are not just creating distance, you are inviting clarity. You are making room for your nervous system to soften. You are no longer absorbing the projections, the volatility, the emotional chaos. You are giving yourself the gift of your own presence. And for those around you, your absence speaks. It says without a single word, this energy no longer feels like love, not as punishment, but as permission for them to meet themselves, for them to notice what happens when your light steps back, for them to reckon with the space you once filled with effort, care, compromise. Removing yourself isn't slamming the door. It's closing it softly and standing on your own side of it for the first time, not with blame, but with boundaries, with breath, with the realization that not everything needs a battle. Some things just need a quiet ending. And sometimes that ending is where the beginning of your true worth finds its voice. You begin to see how long you tolerated crumbs and called it a feast, how often you over-explained in the hopes of being understood, how many pieces of your truth you tucked away just to keep the peace. And slowly, gently you realize your peace is not something you keep, it's something you return to. This is not about cutting people off. It's about cutting ties with the version of you that abandoned yourself to stay connected. That version is tired. That version has earned her rest. Imagine this. You walk away from the noise, the drama, the push-pull. You sit in stillness. You light a candle. You write down what you know now that you didn't know before. You cry not because you're broken, but because you're finally being honest. You're finally listening. And then you say to yourself, I do not need to be louder to be heard. I do not need to stay to prove I'm loyal. I do not need to shrink to make others comfortable. I do not need to keep losing myself to feel loved. This is how you recalibrate. This is how you heal the need to be chosen. This is how you stop auditioning for approval and start honoring your essence. You don't owe anyone your suffering. You don't owe anyone a performance. What you do owe, my dear, is your presence to yourself. And if that means removing yourself from a table where love has gone stale, may you have the courage to rise, to bless the space, and to walk back toward your own light. And when you begin to honor that distance, when you no longer feel compelled to explain, to argue, to plead, something within you begins to reorganize, not out of spite, out of sovereignty. Silence becomes your sanctuary. It becomes the quiet declaration that your energy is not up for negotiation. Let's talk about energy for a moment, shall we? You are made of it, shaped by it, surrounded by it. And yet, so much of it is lost not through effort, but through emotional leakage, through over-explaining, through needing to be understood by those unwilling to listen, through engaging in conversations that only drain, not deepen. And you might not see it right away, but every time you argue with someone committed to misunderstanding you, you're handing them a thread of your life force. Silence stops that leak. It is the loving seal around your spirit. It doesn't mean you don't feel. It doesn't mean you've shut down. It means you've remembered that not everyone deserves access to your emotional temple. It means you've remembered, my presence is a privilege, not a punishment. Let's breathe into that truth, because when you stop leaking energy into arguments, into justifications, into begging for what should be offered freely, you begin to restore. You begin to rise from depletion into devotion. You begin to hear your own soul again. And what does that silence say? It says things words never could. I've outgrown this cycle. I no longer need to prove what's already true. My peace matters more than your reaction. You don't get to decide my worth. Silence can feel sharp at first, especially if you were raised to keep everyone comfortable, especially if you were taught that kindness means availability. But eventually that silence softens. It wraps around you like a warm shawl. It says, "Come sit here. You don't have to fight anymore." And when others push for your response, for your reaction, for your access, and you choose not to give it, do not feel guilt. Feel grace. Not everyone who calls your name is worthy of your answer. And what if the real strength was never in what you could say, but in what you could hold, in what you could allow to pass without grabbing it, in what you could bless and release without needing to prove you were right? Your silence is not a wall. It is a doorway, a passage back into your own energy. Speak it gently to yourself. I do not have to spend my energy to prove my worth. I do not have to explain my boundaries to be allowed to keep them. I do not owe access to anyone who treats my peace like a threat. Let this be the day you hold your energy like sacred water. Let this be the moment your silence becomes not a retreat, but a return. What about those moments when you've tried everything? I mean the times when you've spoken kindly, clearly, even courageously, yet nothing changes. What do you do when you've set the boundary and they continue to step over it? What then? I want you to know this. There is no shame in walking away when staying costs you your peace. We often stay longer than we should, not because we don't know the truth, but because the truth asks us to do something hard, to choose ourselves, to let go of what is familiar, even if it's painful, to stop begging people to meet us in places they never intended to show up. Let's walk through it gently. If your boundaries are being crossed again and again, after you've spoken, after you've clarified, after you've asked with love, then this is no longer miscommunication. It is misalignment. And you are not responsible for making someone respect what they refuse to honor. When conversations begin to twist like vines around your clarity, when they circle back endlessly with no resolution, when the goalpost keeps moving, when logic turns to manipulation masked as concern, this is not a conversation. This is control. And when you feel your body tightening, your chest clenching, your breath shortening, this is your nervous system trying to speak. Listen, it's saying, we're not safe here. You do not owe loyalty to anyone who brings you back into survival mode. There's also the baiting, the drama, the pushing of buttons, the sudden silence followed by accusation, the game playing that demands your energy but refuses your truth. When people bait you, they are not inviting dialogue. They are seeking dominance. And what if staying, even silently, means you abandon your own needs? Not because anyone asked you to, but because you've learned to override yourself in the name of keeping the peace. My love, that is not peace. That is people-pleasing in disguise. Removing yourself completely isn't about winning. It's about not losing yourself again. You are not required to stay in rooms where your soul can't breathe. You are not unkind for walking away from places where your needs are dismissed. You are not dramatic for stepping out of dynamics that distort your worth. Sometimes the most sacred yes to yourself begins with a single quiet no to someone else's chaos. Let's take a breath together. Place your hand on your heart and whisper, I hear you now. Your body knows, your spirit knows. The moment to remove yourself fully is the moment you feel the light inside you dimming in their presence. And the miracle is, when you step out, life steps in. The energy you were using to survive now becomes available for healing, for creativity, for joy. The space you clear by leaving becomes a doorway through which your real self can return. No explanation, no anger, just truth. You are not abandoning anyone. You are reuniting with you. And as always, with every breath of that homecoming, after walking away, after reclaiming your light, there comes a quieter question. How do I live this truth every day? It's one thing to remove yourself once. It's another to choose silence again and again when the world still pulls, still pokes, still begs for reaction. So let's ground this, my love, not just in insight, but in practice, in daily gentle rituals that nourish your strength like sunlight to the soul. Take a pause before responding. Not every question requires an immediate answer. Not every invitation deserves your RSVP. And certainly, not every trigger needs your reaction. Give yourself permission to take minutes, hours, days if needed. Let your nervous system settle. Let the emotions soften. Ask yourself gently, is this response for peace or is it for ego? If your body is still buzzing, your heart still racing, your throat still tight, you don't owe a single word yet. Silence here is self-trust in motion. Return to center through breathwork or grounding. Sometimes the silence we seek externally must begin internally. If your energy is scattered, if you feel disconnected from yourself, you may find it hard to stay quiet with grace. So breathe deeply. Place your feet flat on the earth. Place your hand over your belly. Inhale through your nose. Exhale through your mouth. Say softly inside, I am here now. I am safe in me. This anchoring is what gives silence its power. A regulated body can hold space. An unregulated one will collapse into reaction. Try mirror work. Speak truth back to yourself. Look into your own eyes, not to criticize, but to witness, to honor, to remind yourself, I do not need to perform. I do not need to prove. I do not need to respond to be powerful. Say aloud as often as needed, my silence is not weakness, it is wisdom. I am enough even when I say nothing. I don't owe anyone access to my peace. Let these words become your inner soundtrack, especially in moments of doubt. Journal instead of reacting. There will be moments when you are filled with words, with fire, with feelings too big to hold. Instead of spilling them onto someone who cannot receive them, pour them onto the page. Write what you wish you could scream. Say the truth that aches to be seen. And when you've emptied it all, ask yourself, do I still need to say this out loud? Or was being witnessed by my own pen enough? So much of our healing comes not from being understood by others, but from finally understanding ourselves. Choosing silence is not about silence alone. It is about the container you create inside, the calm, the clarity, the compassion. When these live in you, silence becomes not absence, but presence. Try this today. When the urge to react rises, whisper within, I choose stillness over struggle. When you feel unseen, say, I see me. That's enough. When the world asks for noise, return to your breath and reply, I have nothing to prove. And with every breath of that remembering, know this, you are growing stronger, softer, clearer, and I am walking right beside you. And once you begin to walk in this new rhythm, when silence is no longer a reaction but a devotion, you will start to notice what rises up in the space you once filled with noise. When the noise settles, the soul speaks, and what it offers is not always loud, but it is always true. Silence creates emotional mastery, not because you've numbed yourself, but because you've matured into presence. You begin to feel without collapsing, to witness without absorbing, to hold space for your emotions without drowning in them. You are no longer swept up by every wave. You are anchored in the stillness beneath it all. And from that stillness, self-trust begins to take root. Not the kind that asks others what to do, but the kind that says, I trust myself to choose what honors me. You feel less pulled by urgency, more guided by inner rhythm. You stop asking for direction from those who never walked your path. You pause, you breathe, you listen, and the answers come, softly, clearly, from within. Silence offers you inner spaciousness, and oh, how healing that space is. You're no longer pressed against the edge of your nervous system. There's room for grace now, room for creativity, room to grieve, to rest, to bloom. You don't rush from one thing to the next. You sit with yourself, and in that sitting, you begin to belong to yourself again. People notice. Some will respect this. They'll meet you in your calm. They'll learn to approach you differently, not with drama, but with presence. And some, they will fall away, not because you push them out, but because your stillness no longer feeds their chaos. Let them go. That clarity is a gift too. You begin to hear your intuition again, not your fear, not your old stories, but your soul's voice, subtle, steady, wise. You stop acting from impulse. You start responding from knowing. This is sacred alignment, the quiet kind, the kind that says, I no longer argue for my worth, I live it. And now, let us come home to the final truth. You do not owe your energy to every voice that calls your name. You do not need to explain your silence to those who cannot hear your soul. You do not need to be louder to be powerful. Let your silence be your statement, your soft revolution, your daily altar of devotion to peace. Say with me, I choose peace over proving. I choose wholeness over reaction. I choose myself over chaos. And from this sacred stillness, you begin to live as the woman, the soul, the being you were always becoming. You stop waiting to be heard, because now you're listening to yourself. And that, my love, is the real beginning. Life loves you, and so do I.